Hi, everybody. It's Professor Mitchell. We're continuing Chapter 5 on decimals, and today we're talking about Section 5.3, multiplying decimals and circumference of a circle. So the objectives in this section are to multiply decimals and then estimate when multiplying decimals, multiply decimals by powers of 10, evaluate expressions with decimal replacement values, find the circumference of circles, and then a little bit of problem solving. So like adding and subtracting decimals, multiplying decimals is very similar to multiplying whole numbers. However, the part about placing the decimal point is a lot different. Okay, so your first step is going to be to multiply the decimals as though they are whole numbers. Please note that when you're multiplying decimals, you do not have to line up the decimal points. So there is no need to tack extra zeros onto the end of the decimal. In fact, if the decimals come with extra zeros on them, it's easiest to leave them off, all right, because the decimal points don't have to be lined up. The way that you figure out where to place the decimal point in the answer is like this. You count how many decimal places are in each number and then add those two numbers together, all right? And that'll make a lot more sense when we see an example. So here's an example. We're multiplying 7/10 by 9/10. 7 times 9 is 63. Since 7/10 has one decimal place and 9/10 has one decimal place, 1 plus 1 is 2. So the answer is going to have two decimal places. Okay, the product of 7/10 and 9/10 is 63 hundredths. All right, so our first example, we're multiplying 15 and 9/10 by 62 hundredths. So notice that these numbers are not placed with the decimal points lined up. Again, there's no need to do that when you're multiplying. All right, so this is just like if you were multiplying 159 times 62. 2 times 9 is 18, carry the 1. 2 times 5 is 10, plus 1 is 11, carry the 1. 2 times 1 is 2, plus 1 is 3. This 0 is a placeholder, or some people just leave a space there. 6 times 9 is 54. Write down the 4 and carry the 5. 6 times 5 is 30, plus 5 is 35. Carry the 3. 6 times 1 is 6, plus 3 is 9. So when you add these two numbers together, this is what you get. And the decimal point goes there because 15 and 9/10 has one decimal place. 62 hundredths has plus 2 is 3. So this product is equal to 9 and 858 thousandths. All right, so as usual, if you're feeling confident, you should go ahead and pause the video and try this one yourself. So it's like I'm multiplying 648 times 5. 648 times 5 is 3,240, all right? I won't talk you through the work this time. However, 648 thousandths has 3 decimal places, 5/10 has 1 decimal place, so the answer will have 3 plus 1 equals 4 decimal places. So that product is 3,240 10,000ths, but you could also write it as 324 thousandths. You don't have to include that 0. This 0 on the end does not have to be included. All right, so just like with adding and subtracting, you can estimate when you're multiplying decimals to see if your answer is reasonable. So for example, if I were multiplying 5 and 3/10 times 4 and 2/10, I could round each of those numbers to the nearest whole number. So there's the exact answer. The estimate would be the nearest whole number to 5 and 3/10 is 5. Nearest whole number to 4 and 2/10 is 4. 5 times 4 is 20. The exact answer is 22 and 26 hundredths. So that is a reasonable answer. All right, here's one that you can try if you're feeling frisky. So find the exact product and also an estimate. Okay, so there is the exact product. I just noticed this. I don't like these decimal points here. These don't really mean anything. I would just leave those out. Okay, so the nearest whole number to 32 and 3/10 is 32. The nearest whole number to 1 and 9/10 is 2. So the estimated product would be 64, which is pretty close to 61 and 37 hundredths. So that is a reasonable answer. All right, now we get to multiplying by powers of 10. So multiplying by powers of 10 is super, super easy. All right, if you're multiplying by, you could think of these as large powers of 10, like 10, 100, 1000. All you have to do to multiply that is just move the decimal point to the right the same number of places as there are zeros in the power of 10. So here's an example over here. 5/10 times 100. Take this decimal point and move it 2 places to the right, since there are 2 zeros in 100. When you move it 2 places to the right, you get 50. Notice that you have to insert a 0 here. All right. And then if you're multiplying by small powers of 10, such as 1/10, 1 100th, 1 1000th, 1 1000th, you're going to move the decimal point to the left the same number of places as there are decimal places in the power of 10. Be very, very careful not to say as many places as there are zeros. Depending on how you write your decimal, that may or may not work. But if you use number of decimal places, you'll get the right answer. So for example, if you're doing 6 hundredths times 1 100th, 1 100th has 2 decimal places. So I'm going to take my decimal point from here and move it 2 places to the left. The answer is 6 10,000ths. Okay. So here are some examples of multiplying by large powers of 10. 3 and 4,305 10,000ths times 100. Because there are 2 zeros in 100, I'm going to move the decimal point 2 places to the right. The answer is going to be 343 and 5 hundredths. Okay, not too much suspense in that one. The answer came right up. 76 and 543 thousandths times 10. Since there's only 1 0 in the number 10, you just move the decimal point 1 place to the right. 765 and 43 hundredths. If you multiply by 100, you move it 1 more decimal place for a total of 2. Times 100,000, there are 5 zeros there. So that would go 1, 2, 3, and then I need to tack on 2 extra zeros. So again, the decimal point is moved the same number of places as there are zeros in the power of 10. All right, and then for multiplying by the small powers of 10, remember it's the number of decimal places that determines how far you move the decimal point. 8 and 57 hundredths times 1 100th. 1 100th has 2 decimal places, so this decimal point is going to go 2 places to the left. Notice that we had to insert a couple of extra zeros. The answer is 857 10,000ths. All right, so as usual, if you'd like to try these first, go ahead and pause the video. All right, so for this one, we're moving the decimal point 2 places to the left because there are 2 decimal places in 1/100th. So that answer is 581 thousandths. This one is going to go 1 place to the left. Remember that when one of the numbers is a whole number, the decimal point is at the end of the number, right after the 4. So this is going to be 8,562 and 4/10. 1/1000th has 3 decimal places. So this is going to go 1, 2, 3. Oh, right where the period on the letter C is. You just put a 0 in there. Oh, let me see if I can read that one. When I teach pre-algebra face-to-face, I like to make a little game out of reading the decimals correctly. So let's see. If the decimal point was right here before the 2, this would be 100 thousandths. I think we're looking at millionths here. 24,106 millionths. All right, now we get into evaluating variable expressions. They want me to evaluate 7y if y is negative 28 thousandths. So we're going to do 7 times negative 28 thousandths. That comes out to negative 196 thousandths. Okay. All right, then we get into perimeter and circumference. Perimeter and circumference are pretty much the same idea. It's the distance around the shape. It's just that for a circle, we use this word circumference. This is only used for circles. Any other kind of shape, it's called the perimeter. And the distance around a circle depends on either the radius of the circle or the diameter. So there are 2 different formulas depending on whether you're using the radius or the diameter. First of all, remember that radius means halfway across the circle from the center to the outside of the circle. Diameter means the distance all the way across the circle. So if you're working with radius, the formula for circumference is 2 times pi times the radius. This is usually just written 2 pi r. We'll talk about pi here in a second. If you're working with the diameter, because the diameter is 2 times the radius, you can just take the 2r and replace it with d for diameter. Okay, so it becomes circumference equals pi times d. In higher level math classes, usually we're working with the radius instead of the diameter. So I find I use this one a little more often, the first one. Okay. All right, pi. Let's talk about pi. The symbol pi is looks like that. It represents a number. It is a constant between 3 and 4. A decimal approximation for pi is 3.14, 3 and 1400ths. Pi is what's called an irrational number, which means the decimal for pi goes on and on and on forever and does not have any sort of repeating pattern. Okay, so it actually goes 3.14159265, 3589793, 32384, 6264, 3383. That's all I know. There are people who have thousands of digits of pi memorized. I don't have quite that many. And then sometimes it's easier to use a fraction approximation for pi, and that approximation is 22 sevenths. Later on in this chapter, we're going to talk about converting fractions to decimals. The decimal for 22/7 is 3.142857, and it keeps repeating. So it is the same as pi to the first 2 decimal places. So for what most people are doing, that's usually good enough. Okay, so the first example of finding circumference, they want me to find the circumference of a circle whose radius is 4 inches. So remember the formula, circumference equals 2 pi r. Remember, pi is just a number, all right? So you're never going to be replacing pi with some other number except for possibly 3.14 or 22/7, okay? Now, oftentimes when pi is involved, they will ask you for either an exact answer. If they asked for the exact circumference, it would be this. You would just write it as 8 pi inches. May not look like it's finished, but it is. 8 pi is a perfectly good number. All right, or if they're asking you for an approximate answer and you replace pi with 3 1400ths, you get the approximate circumference of the circle is 25 1200 inches. And if you're using, well, depending on what kind of online homework program you're using, sometimes they might ask you to use 3 1400ths, and sometimes they might ask you to use 22/7. And other times they'll just ask you to use and leave the exact answer like 8 pi. Okay. All right, here's one for you to try. Pause the video, and then when you're ready, we'll compare notes. So the radius of this circle is 9 1/10. If I multiply 2 times pi times r, okay, they actually left out the exact circumference. That might be because the radius is already a decimal. Now we're getting into really sort of sophisticated rounding stuff. But I do want to be consistent with what I said on the last slide. So if they asked for an exact answer in this one, you would just multiply 2 times 9 1/10, which is 18 2/10, and then you would leave the pi symbol. Okay, so the exact circumference would be 18 2/10 pi yards. The approximate circumference using 3 1400ths for pi would be 57 148,000ths. If you have your calculator handy, you might want to take a look at it right now. That it probably has a pi button on it. Now you do have to be careful with that. Again, if you're doing online homework, to read the directions. If the directions say to use 3 1400ths as an approximate value for pi, then that's what you want to do. Not on the calculator in that case, because if you use the pi button on the calculator, it's going to use the whole 3.14159265. And actually, your answer will be more accurate, but the online homework may mark it wrong because it's not the answer they're expecting. Okay, it's just one of those things with online homework. Okay. Next. Joe Severos. So this must be another one of your author's friends or coworkers or neighbors, who is an electrician for Central Power and Light in this story. Worked 40 hours last week, and they want us to calculate his pay before taxes if his hourly wage is $13.88. Okay, so that is a multiplication problem. 13 8800ths times 40. See how they did this? So 0 times anything is 0, so that whole row is just 0. And then 4 times 8 is 32. Carry the 3. 4 times 8 is 32 plus 3 is 35. Carry the 3. 4 times 3 is 12 plus 3 is 15. Carry the 1. 4 times 1 is 4 plus 1 is 5. And then since this number has 2 decimal places and this number has none, 2 plus 0 is 2. So the decimal point would go right there. Okay. This would be another great one to estimate. Estimating will catch just about any kind of mistake you could make with placing the decimal point. All right. So if you rounded 1388 to 14, 14 times 40 is 560, which is very, very close to this answer. All right, so his pay before taxes was $555.20. And that's the end of 5.3.